right. So the first thing that we're going to look at is the coverings of the brain. They're called the meninges, and the meninges have three parts to them. It should be in there. Hang on a second. What membrane covers the brain and spinal cord? That's menin, M-E-N, men in G-E-S, G-E-S. Okay, yeah, and put an S on it. Because that's the name, the collective name for all of these tissues. We'll do this in class. You'll be fine, okay? So the really strong outer covering is the dura mater, and in Latin, dura mater means tough mother. Tough mother, okay? And then so that's the outermost part, and it's really tough, as you can see. And then the innermost lining, the one that sits right on top of the brain itself, if you can pick it up, see I picked up that little thing there, okay? That's the pia mater, P-I-A, pia mater, and that means gentle mother, okay? And then between the two, between the pia mater and the dura mater, is something called the arachnoid layer. What do you think of when you think arachnoid? Spider. Okay, and it's connective tissue. It's relatively thick, comparatively, and that's where the blood vessels run in here, and the cerebrospinal fluid. We'll do all this in class, I promise. So, but that's the arachnoid. So the collective name is the meninges. This is this tissue, name this tissue, if the pin's right in it, would be the dura mater. And name the first tissue the pin passes through would be the pia mater. And I will say all this in class again. I might even bring these into class just to remind you what we've done. So same idea as the parietal and visceral coverings, but they're not calling them parietal and visceral on top of the brain. But the same basic principle applies. So if you take off the coverings of the brain, you'll see that there are several parts to it. This main front part, because here this would be the face coming out here with the eyes and the nose and that, and this is the spinal cord going down the back, okay? So this is caudal, this is rostral. So the most rostral part, the biggest part too, is the cerebrum. And it's divided into two hemispheres by the longitudinal fissure. It's just held together by very loose connective tissue. So there's your right brain and your left brain, okay? Right brain, left brain. And so name this fissure, or name this groove, forget how I say that. That's the longitudinal fissure, and then the right cerebral hemisphere and the left cerebral hemisphere. I'm going to expect right and left for this particular one here. Okay, so the in your notes it says longitudinal cerebral fissure. If you just say longitudinal fissure, that's mostly what it is. Okay, but it separates the right and the left. The cerebellum is this bit back here, and it's not divided into right and left. It's just a whole chunk there, the cerebellum, and it's divided from the cerebrum by the transverse fissure. Okay, so the longitudinal fissure, the transverse fissure, separating the cerebrum from the cerebellum. Okay, and then at the end of the cerebellum, okay, what physical structure do you think is right here in bone? Hint, what's this? Foramen magnum. Here's the spinal cord, So there, the foramen magnum would be sitting right about here, okay, just so you know. In order to see the medulla oblongata, I'm going to do it on this one here. The medulla oblongata sits just underneath the cerebellum. Okay, there. You have a really nice picture of all of this in your textbook, in your lab book. There. So here, this bit here would be the medulla oblongata. So cerebrum, cerebellum, and medulla. Stop it. Medulla oblongata. We'll talk about the functions of all of these parts in class. Ventrally, the olfactory bulbs are kind of ripped on this one. Totally torn off on that one. Here, the olfactory bulbs on this one, you can just see them peeking out here. Olfactory. What sense are we looking at? Smell. Good. So the olfactory bulbs are the most rostral thing on the brain, ventrally seen. Now, the optic nerve and the optic tract and the chiasma. Okay, so the optic nerve, you can just see a little bit of it there. The optic nerves come from the eyes, okay, then they cross at the optic chiasma and continue as the optic tract. A tract is a bundle of neurons inside the CNS, and we'll say this on Monday in class. So the optic tract, the optic nerve, and the optic chiasma. Name this structure. Optic nerve. Okay, so they're coming in from the eyeballs, which are sitting out here. The optic chiasma, and then you can't see the optic tract here. It's right inside the CNS. The optic tract on this one is covered by meninges. So this one doesn't have much of an optic nerve, but it does have a good optic tract. You can cross out mammillary body. Not going to bother with that one. The pons. These are cranial nerves. This that I've just broken here, we'll talk about those too. So here now you can see the whole medulla oblongata runs from, it's the expanded portion here. The medulla oblongata from about here all the way back to where the foramen magnum would be. And it's kind of expanded looking. Okay? The pons is the most rostral part. So specifically named this part of the brain would be the pons of the medulla oblongata. Okay? And the hypophysis, the pituitary gland, is just behind the optic chiasma. Okay? That looks... Okay. This is big. This is being protected. I don't want to take it off. So anyways, it sits, name this structure. You can see the, so the hypothalamus. Here's the pituitary gland. Looks too big. I think that's just part of the tissue. But there's the infundibulum. You don't have to know that name, but that's the little stalk that connects the the hypothalamus of the brain to the pituitary gland. So that's this little bit here is what through which the oxytocin and ADH go to get down to the neural hypophysis. You can't see the two parts to it. Okay, so that's the ventral view. And then sagittally, what we do is we cut down the longitudinal fissure and open the brain out. So you can see sagittally what we've got. So again, the cerebellum And we'll talk about gray matter and white matter in class. The gray matter is the cell bodies of the neurons, and that's the actual thinking part. And the white matter is just dendrites and axons. But it makes a really neat structure in the cerebellum here. Yeah, look, it's called the tree of life. It's actually called the arbor vitae, the tree of life. Okay, so the cortex and medulla. Remember I said there's cortex and medulla now too in the brain. The cortex would be outer or inner. The outer tissue, and the medulla would be the inner tissue. All we can see here is cortex. In order to see medulla, we have to cut it open, and that's why I did a frontal lobotomy on this brain here. Okay, so, and you can see the different color. It looks different. Okay, here's your white matter is central or more internal. The white matter would be the medulla, and the gray matter, which on this brain is kind of brown, is outer cortex. So the outer cortex, inner medulla, and that's the cortex is where the cell bodies are, and so that's your thinking part. That's where the decisions are made. Oh, I know what I didn't do. Sorry. Is on the outer surface of the brain are folds and grooves. The folds are called gyri, and the grooves are called sulci. Okay? So the more intelligent a species is, you understand, the more gyri and sulci there are, because they increase the surface area for thought processes. Okay, you've got more neurons basically packed into the same space. So sheeps aren't exactly known for their massive intelligence, and there's not a whole lot of gyri and sulci. If you look at the human brains up in the cupboard there, the models of the human brains up in the cupboard there, it's many more gyri and sulci. Supposedly, we are more intelligent, okay, as a species. The nervous system is great for being able to deliver ultimate insults. I should get you to stop recording. No, this is good. Ultimate insult. You think somebody is being really thick or dumb or whatever, non-intelligent, you are such a smooth brain. And unless they've done anatomy of the human brain, they won't even get it. You smooth brain. Isn't that fun? The only thing is that they can't get it themselves, so maybe it's not so fun. I don't know, whatever. Anyway, so that's the whole idea of the gyri and sulci, is to, so the grooves, again, the grooves, just like the groove on the horse hoof beside the frog was sulci, these are, I don't know if it's sulci or sulci, whatever. Doesn't matter, so long as you spell it right. Okay? And the folds are the gyri. Okay. So, all right, so the hemispheres, the right and the left cerebral hemispheres, are connected at the bottom of the longitudinal fissure by a tissue called the corpus callosum. Okay, the corpus callosum is the tissue at the bottom of the longitudinal fissure, and it's where the nerve tracts cross from right to left. I don't know if you have heard before, but if you have an injury to the right side of your head, it's most often the left side that gets affected, okay? Because the nerve tracts cross from right to left, not all of them, but some of them, and so that's an issue. So this corpus callosum is where the nerve tracts cross from right to left in the brain. There's 4 ventricles in the brain. A ventricle basically is just a space. These ventricles are filled with cerebrospinal fluid, CSF. And there are two lateral ventricles. So here, and they're the biggest. The lateral ventricles are the spaces in the cerebral hemispheres. So there's one in the right and one in the left. The cerebral, lateral ventricle 1, lateral ventricle 2. It doesn't matter which is which. There's two of them. One's right and one's left. So this is a lateral ventricle. Then the third ventricle is just below that here. And then the fourth ventricle is between the medulla and the cerebellum. Space isn't seen very well. If I was going to do the ventricles, I'd cut another brain open and see if I could do it better. This was cut open with a scalpel. What you need is a nice knife to get it cleanly cut. So those are the ventricles. So it's just the space. Well, the olfactory bulb is cut off of this one, but it would just be the olfactory bulb. You can see it rostrally. So it's just, and it is a little sticky-outy bulby type thing. Optic chiasma, I would ask on a complete brain so that you could see where it was crossing. That's again where the optic nerves cross to form the optic tracts. The thalamus is visualized as kind of a roundish area. It's part of what's called the midbrain, the diencephalon, and the thalamus is this roundish bit here. We'll redo this again after, and like I said, I think I might bring these to class on Monday just to show you again. So it's kind of a roundish looking area of the brain, and then the hypothalamus is right below it. Makes sense, okay? So your pituitary gland would be hanging off right here. And I'm not going to try and do the functions of all these things right now because you won't remember it anyways. We'll do it in class. Pineal body, sometimes you can see and sometimes you can't. Would be just in here. This one doesn't have one. I'm going to cut open another one for Monday and we'll see if we can see it. Well, transverse fissure. Oh, transverse fissure right here between the cerebrum and the cerebellum. The pattern of the white matter and gray matter form the arbor vitae. The third ventricle, fourth ventricle are connected by an aqueduct, which I don't think I've ever labeled on a diagram, and the medulla oblongata. Okay, so it's again, that's why I'm doing it today. It's not all that hard structurally. You just need to be able to give me a brief description of what the parts do, which we'll cover in class. And the meninges, collective name, outer one is dura mater, inner one is pia mater, and the basic function of each layer. So we'll do that in class on Monday. Okay, so that's the brain. And like I said, there's great pictures in your